Hello and welcome to a very special iteration of the Writer's Workshop. So, Priest is standing right above me with a paddle to ensure that this goes just right, and he's juggling it in his hand very menacingly, so we'll just make sure that we have to do this properly. So, again, welcome to Writer's Workshop. I am your host, Flammenwerfer, and we have Priest as my supervisor.
Hi, I'm here. Don't mess this up, Flam.
Yes, master. So, barring any instances where I'll have to go away for some reason, let's jump right into this. With the Writer's Workshop here, what we do is we take the user-submitted stories, usually those that they submit themselves, and would honest critique on them, and we do just that. We give our thoughts and we critique them in an honest, completely as objective as possible way. However, with that, I would like to state explicitly that any opinions, any biases, I would like to just immediately put on the table that these are solely my opinions and Priest's opinions as well, based on what we know, what we've been taught, and what we've experienced. Your mileage may vary. So, without further ado, let's jump into today's submission, which is, as we have here, How Could I Forget, being the title, by a Mr. or Mrs. Saberking2012. So, we have a really nice saddened picture of Diamond Tiara here with the tags Dark, Equestria Girls, Sad, Diamond Tiara, of course, Silver Spoon, Cheerily, and the other rated E for everyone. Now, the description reads, Diamond Tiara is starting to get angry over how late Silver Spoon is, so she decides to do a little investigating to see why. After a certain phrase is heard, the memories of a forgotten past resurface, and not for the better. ... So, already I can tell I have my own preconceived notions of what I think is going to happen, but knowing my inferences, I'm probably going to be wrong. I'm guessing it has to do something personal between Diamond and Silver Spoon, and this will either go the slightly redemptuous way of, okay, I'm Diamond Tiara being terrible on herself, and then there's the way out, or this is going to go horrifically tragic. So it'll probably be the latter. We'll see.
Especially this one's really... Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, especially with a chapter title that says Suppressed Memories. So.
Yeah. What's really interesting about this one, and I think it's really cool that this was submitted to the Writer's Workshop, he's got noted in here in the descriptions that he has several people that came in and edited this story already prior to sending this into an actual reviewer. And that shows a lot of dedication and a lot of actual care that they put in making sure that this story was good. So that's really awesome. But then I also immediately right after that, it says on the popular story list as of 5/13/17. So, I mean, if you want to document in history when you started to become horse famous, I mean, that might be good for you. But on the whole, some other writers that are just starting out kind of take that as a little braggy thing. Take that for what you will. I honestly don't care, but it is worth noting.
Indeed, although I cannot honestly complain about any of that, because when Metroid Equus started getting even the most teeny bit popular, I documented 3 instances of when it hit the refeatured box, and until I realized I was incredibly autistic for doing so. So just take that for what you will.
I've got the date of my Equestria Daily feature on Twilight Tries Not to Think, so I'm not one to talk. So, anyway, let's jump into this thing.
Indeed we shall. So, suppressed memories we go. Oh boy. So, suppressed memories. I was mad. Beyond mad. What was that word? Ah, yes. Furious. I just couldn't believe how late Silver Spoon was. Normally, she'd arrive no later than 1, which is right after school let out, but today she was nowhere to be found. I tried asking Featherweight, but it was clear that he was just being as useless as he always seems to be. Unfortunately, I haven't the slightest idea of where she could be, Featherweight replied. All I know is that she told me earlier today that she'd arrive later today than she normally would, though she didn't explain why. But since she told Miss Cheerily beforehand, she wouldn't mind waiting. I had asked nearly everyone in our group where Silver Spoon could be, and yet none of them knew. It was starting to drive me crazy. Ever since we were little, we were always together. Always. I couldn't remember a time when we were apart for longer than a day or two. Obviously, this turned my current problem into something I despised. I was pacing in front of the library door when Featherweight walked up to me once more. I'm sorry, but haven't you been here since last period? Why don't you go and wait for somewhere else? Maybe read a book or something, he asked, eyeing me in the face. I glared at the boy. Go somewhere else? I growled. If I do that, she'll think that it's okay if she shows up late every day, and it's not. When she walks through that door, I'm going to be giving her a piece of my mind. Luckily for him, I didn't have to wait much longer, because right then there was a knock at the door. Featherweight was about to open it, though I made quick to stop him. Wait, I whispered. Why don't we let Miss Cheerily open the door, and then see what she says to her? I glanced back towards Featherweight. Since she obviously doesn't seem to want me to know, let's see how she explains it to her. Featherweight looked concerned. But that'd be eavesdropping, wouldn't it? That's not right, Diamond Tiara. Why don't we just... I grabbed his hand and dragged him behind the wall of books before he could finish. I pushed him behind the wall and clutched onto the banister so that I could see into the room without getting caught. Silently, I cleared my throat and proceeded to shout, Miss Cheerily, someone's at the door! Before ducking back down. A loud groan was heard from the other room as she tiredly walked towards the door. Behind it was an exhausted-looking girl, and she instantly dropped the attitude. Silver Spoon, what took you so long? Is everything okay? She asked, concerned for a student. Yeah, I'm all right, Silver Spoon sighed. I just came to talk to Diamond Tiara real quick. But I guess she's not here. She took a quick glance around the room, likely waiting for me to appear out of nowhere, and seemed disappointed when I didn't. I felt that all too familiar tug in my heartstrings, that God-forsaken instinct to run down there and give her a hug kicked me in as well, but I reluctantly choked down the sympathy and continued to listen. I couldn't afford to show such weakness in front of anyone. I could call her here if you want to talk to her. She shook her head. No, it's fine. I was just going to tell her why I was late, that's all. Cheerily smiled. Well, if you're in that big of a rush, she began, I could take a message for you. What was it that you want to tell her? I growled quietly. Why didn't she want to see me? Why didn't she run out and look for me? Didn't she care? Why didn't she put herself in my shoes? Maybe there was a personal issue or something, DT. Maybe she was too nervous to tell you. I whipped around, and he gulped. Too nervous? I asked, my voice dripping with derision. How could she be too nervous when she just ran over there and told Miss Cheerily? A teacher over her best friend. I hissed in the loudest possible whisper and raised my fist in the air. When I get my hands on her, I'll... It's just, well... It's Mother's Day, and I want to go talk to my mom before it gets too late. Just tell her that I want to go see my mom. She'll understand. So many feelings crashed into me at that one moment that I could have sworn I had gotten shot. Oh, that's certainly no problem. Say hi to your mom for me, Miss Cheerily said with a smile. Yeah, I will. Bye. Silver Spoon replied curtly and proceeded to leave. Aw, isn't that nice? Featherweight gushed. See, Diamond, there's nothing bad at all. She just wanted to go see her mom. Nothing to worry about. His voice trailed off when he faced me. My fist was still suspended in air, shuddering violently. In fact, my entire body was trembling. My other hand clung tightly to the railing as if to anchor myself. Slowly but surely, my other hand dropped numbly to my side. I felt like my insides were tearing each other apart. Mother's Day. My head drifted down to face the floor, eyes unmoving. Diamond Tiara, are you okay? He asked. She. I couldn't even form a sentence. My vision blurred as tears started flowing down my cheeks. Hey, what's wrong? I didn't answer. You're crying. I was crying. A rare enough experience on its own. My knees went weak with misery, and I slid to the floor. At that moment, Miss Cheerily walked up the stairs. Oh, Diamond Tiara, you just missed your friend. She said she was going to... I didn't want to hear any more. I needed to get away. After I ran for what felt like forever, I headed outside, slamming the door behind me and slumping onto the ground. I sobbed violently, no longer caring what was going on around me. I didn't care what Featherweight felt or what Cheerily would think. I slowly lost myself to the memory of that day 5 years ago. She was only 6. I was a few months older than her. Her parents were very kind people, and her mother considered me to be another child of hers. Life was great. That was before the accident. It was Mother's Day, and it was a pretty special one, too. She was just about to be promoted, so the celebration would only be between Silver Spoon, her mother, and myself. I can trust you girls to stay safe while you're out, right? Her father asked in the early morning on his way out. Her mother simply smiled. Don't worry, dear. We'll be just fine. She paused to ruffle Silver Spoon's hair and said, Besides, you need a day out once in a while, don't you? I playfully shoved Silver Spoon behind her mother, and we laughed so hard that we nearly fell over. Oh, be nice, you two, her mother jokingly scolded as we smeared pancake batter on her shirt. The rest of the day was about just as fun as that moment. The 3 of us went bowling, saw a movie, and played in the park together. We also went shopping. There were dresses, toys, dolls. It was wonderful. As we were walking around the park, some stranger appeared out of nowhere and demanded we give up our belongings. Silver Spoon's mother put us behind her for our safety and refused. The unknown stranger stabbed her, but before the stranger could hurt us, there were a bunch of loud noises resulting in the stranger running away. Her mother clutched her chest and let out a scream of pain that made my blood run cold. We whipped around and saw her bleeding out on the grass. I didn't remember much after that, only that it was practically in slow motion. We had shrieked and cried for help, asking people that were passing by to call the emergency number to save her mother. After the screaming had stopped, I remember her mother pulling us both close. Tell your father that I love him, okay? She rasped, trying to soothe Silver Spoon's crying. And I love you girls too. The best daughter's mother could ever hope to have. Her body shuddered once, and then was still. I could remember the sirens in the background, Silver Spoon's painful cries, the tears running down her face, and I remember that she had died before the paramedics arrived due to blood loss. I awoke from my nightmare, face down on the hard ground, crying hysterically. I was writhing weakly on the ground, my voice hoarse and my eyes squeezed shut. That memory had haunted me my whole life. How could I have forgotten it now, on this very day? I winced in self-loathing, drowning my senses in misery. Only then did I remember her words. I felt my body stiffen. Silver Spoon. How could I have been so insensitive, so cruel? How could I have not put myself in her shoes? I was her best friend. No, she was like a sister to me. She had loved her even more than I had. How could I act so upset? I recall her words just a few minutes before. I want to go talk to my mom before it gets too late. She must be at the cemetery. I quietly stood up and slowly started walking away from the school, trying to stop myself from shaking. One quick look up and it was clear that it would rain, so I ran back inside and grabbed an umbrella and walked towards the cemetery. The cemetery wasn't as far away as I had remembered. Before long, I was outside the steel gates. I pressed my face against the bars, looking for her. I noticed her dark gray backpack on the ground, and I saw her sitting before a small stone. I could hear her mumbling to herself. I hope you're proud of me, she said slowly. I've made all sorts of new friends at school. They're all so nice to me. I didn't think there were people like that left in the world. I could hear the smile in her voice. I hope you're not being mad at me for being so weak, she continued. I took in a sharp breath. Me and Diamond are still as close as ever. though she's still her usual self. But she's my best friend, and I could never leave her by herself. I wouldn't be able to stand it if she were alone. She's done so much for me. I had to force myself not to cry. But it was no easy feat. I could feel some drops of rain falling down from the sky, and so I quietly opened the gate and walked over to her. I paused right behind her and opened up the umbrella. She jumped when the umbrella opened, and looked shocked to find me standing behind her. Diamond Tiara, what are you doing here? I put my hand on her shoulder. Miss Cheerley told me about you coming to see your mom, and I knew exactly where you'd be. She smiled weakly. I knew you'd figure it out, she mumbled, and then turned back to her mother's grave. So, she continued, this is it. I come here sometimes before I arrive at school, she explained. I talked to her. I sat down next to her. You know, I said, haven't been here since the funeral. I turned away, ashamed. So, I've never spoken to her before. She pulled me closer. Well, you're here now. Say something. Wish her a happy Mother's Day. I sighed. Okay, I said, here goes nothing. I took a deep breath before I spoke. Hey, Mom. I hope everything's going okay for you in heaven. I'm sorry that I never came to see you, but I've been busy, and I struggled to find the right words. Silver Spoon put her hand on my back encouragingly. I miss you a lot. I know I promised I'd never forget. Well, I didn't forget. I just didn't want to accept that you were dead. After you did die, I tried to force myself to believe that it didn't happen, like you were out seeing the world or something. I thought that if I came here, then that would mean that I accepted that you were dead and I was to blame, so I tried not to think about it. But of course, that didn't work very well. My breathing was funny for a minute. I would not cry. Not in front of her. So, that's my story, and if you really are watching us now, I hope you saw all the crazy stuff we did. I think you'd like it. Silver Spoon smiled. That was actually kind of sweet. I scoffed sarcastically. Well, I mused. I guess everyone has to be a sappy pants once in their life, right? I didn't know what to say after that, so I began reading the gravestone. Here lies Rose Spoon, beloved wife to Cloud Spoon and beloved mother to Silver Spoon. I squinted. The writing seemed off. She noticed my confused stare. What's the matter? I shook my head. I don't think the gravestone's written right. Wouldn't it just say Silver Spoon with a period instead of a comma? Silver Spoon gave a half-hearted chuckle. As she reached forward, she noticed a small bush in front of the gravestone. After a quick glance around the cemetery, I saw that each gravestone had at least one bush surrounding it. She curled her hand over the top and pulled it away, revealing another line to the inscription. My jaw dropped. Here lies Rose Spoon, beloved wife to Cloud Spoon, and beloved mother to Silver Spoon, and Diamond Tiara. I could have fainted right there and then. Every single emotion in the world was running through me at the same time. I didn't know what to think. Her mom, her mother, had loved me enough to consider me her daughter, and it was well known enough that it was placed on her grave. Several minutes of stunned silence suffocated the air around us until Silver Spoon said, I think we've had enough surprises for one day. She helped me to my feet, nearly collapsing again. Yeah, I think we better go, I whispered. I patted her, our mother's grave, and then put my arm around her, holding the umbrella above our heads. I think Cheerly had some cookies for us after tutoring was done, I said, nudging her with my elbow. She gave me a somber smile. Yeah, she said. I haven't eaten in hours. Together, we made our way back to school, feeling closer than ever felt before. And it looks like there's a poem here, too, taken from from another author from Family Friendly Poems. So, based on the story in there, we'll let you guys read that for yourselves. But based on the looks of it, it looks like it's very appropriate. So, yeah, that was the story.
What do you think, Flame?
Honestly, this was actually one of two ways I expected it to go, and all things considered, I think it actually did it pretty well. The writing was fine. I noticed very few obvious technical errors, as I only noticed them when reading the sentences myself, that something just came out jumbled and not right, but I'm not too concerned with that, to be honest. In fact, I'm not really concerned with anything with this story per se, taken at face value. It's actually quite good. It does the whole, in a very simple sense, for 2,500 words, the whole child growing up, a child with another family, like, daughter I never had kind of theme going on here. Mm-hmm. Although I honestly saw material for at least half again as much as the number of words that were here.
Mm-hmm.
So few things felt rushed, particularly the introduction of the mom, and ultimately, actually, it was actually going really well, and I expected it to jump right to the cemetery, to be completely honest, and then
Yeah.
and do it through narrative or through her own thoughts. So, in my opinion, the flashback kind of seemed a little redundant. In my opinion, as I say, my opinion 3 different times in the same sentence.
Right.
So.
No,
But yeah, that's kind of my take on that. I mean, it worked, but you got the point across actually quite magnificently without it, and I think it actually would have been a much more powerful piece without it. It would have quickly ingrained itself into our imagination as to what happened. Whether you decided to reveal what happened in great detail or not via another medium would have been up to you, but ultimately, I feel that the only thing that didn't really belong was just that flashback scene. Not that it broke the story by any means, but as I said before, it made it a tad redundant. Overall, though, I thought it was nice. Priest?
So I have a lot of trouble reviewing dark, sad stories, and
Really?
part of that problem comes down to that you never know whether the writer is writing from the heart or based on a previous experience. So if they're writing about something cathartic that is like about losing their mom to some tragic accident and they send something like this, I have a very strong difficulty in my heart actually saying like, no, this is where you made mistakes. This is where this is bad, because if they're writing something for themselves and they're writing to make themselves happy or to help them move on from something sad and traumatic in their lives, I never want to beat that down. If writing is an outlet, a creative outlet for them to work through trauma and stress, I want to make sure that people always write that and they never feel like what they did was bad.
Certainly, but
or even if it needs improvement. However, there is some context behind the story. And that being that, looking through the comment, this has been sent to multiple different reviewing places, each of them giving this story extremely high praise. And in addition, the story was released on Mother's Day. So it is very clearly a targeted story to exploit the character dynamic between Silver Spoon and Diamond Tiara. This was very purposeful. This was written for Mother's Day with the purpose of getting some feels on Mother's Day. I don't think that this was a cathartic piece because Saber King lost his mom. So I'm going to go to town on this. This story is fine. If you sent this to a writing 101 class, I think you probably would get an A. If you sent this to an intermediate writing class, I think you'd pass with a C. And the reason why I would say that is because what this story doesn't really do well is 2 things. One, you really need to work on figurative language if you are going to take your writing to the next step. Similes, metaphor, coloring your words with poetry. Because the way that everything is happening right now is being very explicitly told and not very much shown. Using first-person perspective, you're able to do things like, my hair stood on edge. I froze in place. But instead, you used language like I stopped. My fist was shaking. Where you could have used more colorful ways of describing what's going on without directly saying what is exactly happening and paint that picture within the reader's mind.
Right.
So that's one of the big things. And definitely what you kind of touched upon was pacing. This story was extremely quick to the point that you had to rely on a flashback sequence in order to explain the deep trauma that apparently Diamond Tiara had forgotten on Mother's Day, which as a story writing tactic is kind of a cop-out. I can totally understand if you didn't want to write a 10,000 word fic, but I'm going to be honest with you, if you want this story to be better, you have to be able to explain that story organically for example, if you had Diamond Tiara walk through town from Cheerilee's place to the cemetery on the other side of the town, and as she walks towards the cemetery, because she knows what it is, as she sees it, she sees and paints the picture of the flashback in the mind along the way. So, for example, she walks by Silver Spoon's house, and she remembers how the two girls and the mother walked out the door. She walks by a department store, and they're getting dolls.
She walks by the park itself.
Yeah, and remembers the stabbing scene, remembers the blood, remembers the panic, the way they scream, and then arrives at the cemetery. And then you can paint this scene, paint this moment when Diamond Tiara is frozen in place. She's wondering to herself, do I go back now? Do I go approach my friend? It's an entirely different dynamic. Even with what I've just explained, it painted more of a picture than what this story has given me. It felt like puppets on a string doing what you have told them to do rather than characters in the story. And I understand that that's kind of harsh, and I'm sorry about that. But if you want to improve as a writer, someone has got to tell you where you need to improve. And you have potential. Work on it. So this is fine. You deserve all the upvotes that you have, but you could do better.
Absolutely. And I'm certain that the author feels that way as well, or they probably would not have submitted this in the first place.
Yes.
So
totally.
If that's how we want to continue with reviewing it, then I happen to agree wholeheartedly with you. Now, granted, it doesn't have to be explicitly when you work on your figurative language, when you work on your imagery. It doesn't have to be through similes, through metaphors. You can find your own style. I mean, granted, I know a couple people who can just paint an entire scene just with similes and metaphors on its own, and goddamn, I wish I could do that, but I can't. I have to use them. Sparsely to make it work for my style.
Right.
Now,
everyone has their own style. Totally.
Right. But at the same point, yes. While there is a sort of, while I don't exactly agree on the fact that it is always 100% of the time preferred for showing versus telling, I don't agree with that one bit.
No, I agree with that too. But the problem is that there was very little.
Oh, absolutely, certainly. So the feelings felt more explained, artificial than real. And granted, it got the job done. I was just like, oh, hey, look at that. I see what you're doing there. But,
it did.
But I didn't actually feel it in the sense that, oh, shit, like, I feel terrible right now. So,
this story didn't ruin my day.
Right. Exactly. So, or just make me feel like I had to go take a walk somewhere just to clear my thoughts. So maybe that's not what you were going for, honestly. Maybe you're just doing a little bit, just trying to see what you could do in this sector. I know I've released random stories in new genres for me just to see how it would happen, but ultimately that's how I feel about it. Now having actually had some experience in the feels department.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But that's all I got.
Yeah, and I happen to back up almost the entirety of your assertion as well. So, that being said, I'll reiterate my thoughts on this in a very TLDR format, in the sense that it was good for what it was worth at face value. However, this actually had the potential to be much larger than it was. Granted, the whole dead mom trope has a few homes in this fandom. Either with a really main character that we know and love, who is clearly not Best Pony regardless, and or maybe through OCs or through fandom canonical ways. But regardless of the fact, now this story had the ability to be more. But in the end, I will say it was good for what it was.
Agreed.
Indeed. So, with that being said, I think that's all we have for this particular iteration, right? We do one per each, right? So, with that, I say thank you to Saberking2012 for submitting the story and allowing us to look at it and analyze it a little bit. So, and to everyone else who happened to take time to watch this and who was actually in some manner taking mental notes, taking advice from us. God, I also like to live dangerously. So, with that, I am Flammenwerfer,
I'm Priest.
and this has been another iteration of Writer's Workshop. We'll see y'all next time.
See ya.
Bye.